Hello. I hope you are doing well. I am doing great. Thanks for asking. So, in this video, we are just going to take a very brief introduction into Ambiorix, the very bare bones. But then again, there isn't a better way for me to show you how things work than just doing a simple project. So, we will create an application, well, a web application, where when the user clicks on a button, a new quote is generated. So we will make use of the Fortunes R package for generation of the random quotes. And I think that will be enough to show you how Ambiorix works, just the core. So let's get to it. The first thing that we need, of course, is to create a folder or a directory which houses our project, right? So let's just do make dir hello world. You can of course do this in your file manager. I just prefer using the terminal. Then I change into that hello world directory. And then inside this folder, let's go for index.r. So let's create a file called index.r. This will be the entry point for our application. So mostly when building the front end, I just call the entry point index.r, right? So, and then after that, the next thing is to open this in your favorite editor. You can go for Positron, RStudio, or VS Code, whichever works for you. For me, I use NeoVim, by the way. So, before actually that, I need to split my terminal. Don't worry about this part. So tmax new session, and then I just call this hello world, and now we are inside that folder, and I'm just going to fire up NeoVim, and now I am inside of index.r, right? The first thing is, of course, to load the required libraries. So of course we need to do library Ambiorix, and then the next thing, we'll need HTML tools. So HTML tools, because we are going to work on the front end. And after that, let's create an app instance of Ambiorix, right? So let's say app will be Ambiorix with a capital A, subset new, and that creates the app instance, right? Now, just to mention, Ambiorix works on the request response cycle. The client, in this case, it will be the browser, sends a request to the web server, and the web server responds with, well, a response, right? So for the web server to respond, it needs to have handlers for certain endpoints, assuming that is where the client will send the request to. So in this case, let's attach a handler to our app instance. So we will go with app, then subset get at slash, and that will be handled by home get. And that is a very simple handler. So it's saying for every request made at slash, this is the endpoint. So endpoints, an endpoint is something like we have slash about slash contact slash, like anything, right? We are saying every request made to slash will be handled by this handler called homeget. So let's define homeget. So homeget, if I can get that right, homeget will be a function of request and response. Request and response, right? Now, again to mention, every handler in Ambiorix must take in the request and the response object. The request object will contain all the information you need to know about the request. The path to which the request was sent to, were there any query parameters, was there anything in the body of the request, and what was it? Were there any cookies? Literally anything, any information you need about this request will be in that request object. Then for the response object, it is the class that we use to construct the responses, right? So basically sending the responses back to the client. And every Ambiorix handler must be in that format. It must be a function which takes in the request and the response objects. So let's start with a simple hello world. So let's say the HTML will be tags subset h3, and then let's just go with hello world, and then let's send this response back to the client. So we construct the HTML and then we send it back using res subset send, right? And here we've already attached the handler. So the next thing that we need to do is to start the application. So app subset start. And now let's take it for a spin, right? Let's go with R script index.r. And there you go, it's listening. And when we visit that endpoint, you can see that we now have a hello world. Of course, our interest was not just the hello world. We need to have quotes and a button somewhere. So we will start with the quotes, right? So let's first of all check how does fortunes, like what is the structure of a fortune, right? So let's create a new R session and then let's check. If I do fortunes fortune, what do I get? So I get a new fortune. I run it again, I get a new fortune, again a new fortune, and so on, right? So let's assign this to a variable called x. So x will be fortunes, fortune, right? And then when we check x, it's of course a new fortune. So if you try to like subset x, so just say x and then the subsetting operator, and then just click tab, you will see that x has quote, the author, the context, the source, and the date. So if we say quote, you get the quote itself. If we say author, we get the author. If we say context, we get the context. Source, x subset source, if I can get that right, and then we have the date, right? So this is literally more than what we need, because for us we need the author, the date, the author, wait, what? We need the quote, the author, and the date, right? So let's go to our application, and then at the top let's library fortunes, right? And then immediately after getting into the handler, let's create a fortune. So ftn will be fortune, and then after creating the fortune, okay, the diagnostics are a bit annoying, so let me just switch them off. So anyway, after creating the fortune, we now need to include the quote itself in the HTML response. So what we will do is, first of all, let's wrap this in a tag list, right? So let's wrap it in a tag list, and then after the header, let's have a p tag, right? A paragraph tag. So tags subset p, and then inside of the p tag, let's include the quote. So ftn subset quote, right? And then let's change this from hello world to fortunes, because I mean that's what we are talking about. So then that's it. First of all, let's see if this works. So stop the previous one and then rerun this new one, and here we go. So the header changed, and now we have a quote. Of course, each time we reload this, a new quote will be generated. Either I am misunderstanding your intent, or you need another cup of coffee. Oh, hey, coffee. Okay, yeah. So now you'll notice that each time we reload this page, a new quote is generated. This is because each time you reload, the browser sends a request to that endpoint, and then homeget gets called, because that is the handler for requests to slash, right? And when it gets called, it kind of reruns the whole thing again. So it generates a fortune, then the HTML responds and sends it back to the client. So now we have the quote. The next thing, we need a dash, maybe a dash, and then the author, right? Like this is the quote, then a dash, and then the author. Yeah, let's try that. So I'm just going to Google long dash HTML, and then let's grab it from somewhere. So let's take the HTML code here for the long dash. So after the quote, we need the long dash, but that long dash is an HTML quote. So to tell HTML tools that this is like raw HTML, we need to wrap it in HTML and undo. We need to wrap it in HTML and paste it there, right? And then, so we have the quote, the long dash. Now we need the author. So we are going to do ftn subset author, and that should work. Let's see. Let's see. And here we go. So we have the quote and then the long dash and then the author. Now after the author, let's add a comma and the date. Yeah, that makes sense. A comma and the date. So again, we go back to the code, a comma, then ftn subset date, and that's it. That should be able to give us something nice. Let's stop and restart it and visit here. So you can see that now we have the quote itself, the author, and the date. And I think this is all about the content that we want to display. Obviously, as I said, when you reload this like page, you'll be getting a new quote each time. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the button, because we don't want the user to manually have to reload the page. We can just add a button on the page, which when clicked generates like, you know, the whole quote, the author, and the date, right? The way to add, the way to like handle buttons or inputs if you're from Shiny is via forms. So let's create a new form right here. We are just going to call it form. Form will be tags subset form, and then inside of that form, for our case, we only need the form to have a button, which is the submit button. So inside of this form, we need to have tags subset button. This button is of type submit, the submission button. And then the label, let's give it a label of new fortune, because I mean, when you click on it, you get a new fortune, right? Now we need to talk about this form. There are two key things that we need to provide it with. The first one is the action. The action is the path to which the form will be submitted. In this case, I want this form to be submitted to slash. So like just submit it to the home page. The second thing is the method. So the method, in this case, we need this form to be to submit a get request. So basically the current state reads, I want you to, when this button is clicked, the submit button, I want you to submit this form contents using a get request to slash, which is the action, right? And that is literally it. The only thing that's remaining is to include the form after the p tag. Yeah, that sounds good. So after the p tag, let's add the form, and that's it. Now if we restart the application, let's see what we have. Now we have like a button here. So I mean the quote and whatnot, and then the button. If we reload the page, okay, still works. Now let's click on the button. So if we click on it, there we go. So each time you click on the button, you have a new quote generated, and then the person who made that quote and the date. One thing to note though is that when using this button, it added something on the URL. There is a question mark that it added. Now this question mark is what we call query. After it comes the query parameters, right? But in our case, the form only had a submit button. It did not have any other inputs. It had no email, it had no like any text input, nothing, just the submit button itself. But usually the query parameters are key value pairs. So like if we had a name field, it would be the name equals Kennedy, and then I don't know, last name equals Mwavu and stuff, right? But in our case, we only needed the form to have the submit button alone and nothing in it. So when using get, it's when the form fields are submitted as query parameters. If we were to use some other method like post, then the form fields would not be submitted as query parameters and we would not have the question mark. For example, let's go back to the code and let's say app subset post at slash, let's say it will still be handled by home get, right? So we are just adding another handler in case it's a post request at slash, we still want to handle it using home get, right? And yeah, so just for the form, let's change this to post. So it's now the form will now submit a post request, and then let's restart the application, then visit this URL. So now when I click on new Fortune, you can see that the URL hasn't changed. There isn't that question mark. So that question mark is usually associated with like a get request. I mean the get request will add the form fields as key value pairs in the query parameters, but for a post request, it will add the form fields in the request body. In this case, by default, it's multi-part form data. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if something that you're supposed to know, but I guess it helps. So this is like the minimal application that we wanted, and I think we have it. So when you reload, this time it asks you if you need to confirm the form resubmission, because a post request is supposed to create a resource in the server, right? So it's asking you, are you sure that you want to resubmit this form, right? Because you've already created that resource. But it would not be the case for a GET request, which is supposed to retrieve information from the server or a resource from the server. And there are other types of requests. For example, a PUT request is supposed to edit a resource on the server. Then a delete request is, of course, deleting a resource from the server. So in this case, of course, I am sure. But now if we change that back to a GET request, which is the most appropriate here, and then we rerun the application again. Now if we visit this new Fortune, you see now even if I first submit the form and then I reload the application, it doesn't ask me about if I am sure, because a GET request is just supposed to retrieve information. Retrieving information doesn't change the state of things in the server, but creating a resource does change the state of things. So I guess that is it about this. The next thing would be to make this a little bit pretty, which I will do in the next video, I guess. So yep, that's it. You have a good day.